The standoff between Indian and Chinese forces in Ladakh has completed more than a month, and yet there are no signs of a solution. Although the first of the big meetings is taking place on 6th of June as we speak, some kind of a movement forward is expected to take place. So what exactly is the Chinese strategy in trying to highlight the border issue with India? On Simply Nitin this week, I'm going to speak about the Chinese strategy of creeping forward inch by inch, mile by mile, and then claiming that they are reasonable in diplomacy or negotiations. You're on Simply Nitin and I'm Nitin Gokhale. So when the standoff between Indian and Chinese forces began on 5th and 6th of May 2020, the Chinese started assembling in force at 3 or 4 different points in eastern Ladakh along the line of actual control between India and China. But their main aim or main focus was at the finger area of the Pangangso Lake, which is, as I said earlier, 135 kilometer long, 2/3 of which is in Tibet or China and 1/3 is in India. You've seen enough media reports on what exactly have the Chinese tried to achieve at the finger 4 and finger 8 area. But let me give you a little more detail. The Chinese strategy for years, for decades in fact, has been to do 3 or 4 different points, come in there or try to come in there and then appear to have a larger design, but whereas their focus is always on one point, which they want to achieve at the end of negotiations or end of the standoff. And that's exactly what they're trying to do during this current crisis. They tried to intrude into Galwan area, hot springs and other points along eastern Ladakh border. Their main focus was on trying to entrench themselves between the finger 4 and finger 8 area of the Pangangso Lake. But this is not something that they have done for the first time. Way back between 1959 and 1962, before the 1 month long war happened between India and China, the Chinese had adopted this tactic 6 decades ago. And I'm quoting from a document of Government of India which said, Chinese aggression in maps. This document by the Publications Division was published in January 1963, months after the war ended in November 1962. And as you can see on the map, I'm going to highlight how the Chinese crept forward gradually over the years between 1959 and 1962. If you look at the yellow line, this was the line that Indian and Chinese forces or Indian and Chinese governments had agreed upon, where the Chinese forces were stationed. They started claiming further land, coming further west to the line which is red line as we are showing on the map. And by 1962, on 20th October 1962, when the Chinese forces gathered in strength and attacked small pickets of Indian forces in that area in Galwan and Chipchap Valley further north towards DBO, they came right up to the green line, as you can see on the map. The area between green and the red line, which has been highlighted on the map, is what they actually acquired through that creeping strategy. And that's exactly what India did not want. India claims the area which is highlighted as part of Aksai Chin, but which is also part of the old Jammu and Kashmir state and part of Ladakh. But since the 1950s, the Chinese had occupied the area of Aksai Chin and now the highlighted area on the map post 1962. So when the negotiations began, when the ceasefire was declared on 21st of November 1962, the Chinese very magnanimously said that we will go back to the red line, which actually meant nothing, because in any case they had gained the area between the yellow line and the red line, and that created problems for Indian decision makers who could not have accepted this creeping advance and the acquiring of land and territory that the Chinese had done through this tactic. That tactic they have adopted as their favorite game or a favorite trick of the playbook, not just in the Himalayas, but if you come to more contemporary years in 2008 and 2009, they did the same thing, the Chinese did the same thing in South China Sea. First, a small fishing boat came to South China Sea near Vietnam or Philippines. Then they got more militia, Chinese militia boats coming into that. And then finally, they built an airstrip saying, no, this is only for the use of the fishermen there. And slowly, within 4 or 5 years, they actually expanded the exclusive economic zone by acquiring these small artificial islands in South China Sea around Vietnam and Philippines. Now, same tactics have been adopted in 2020. India is aware of it, and that's why the talks that are held in Chushul or at Chushul across the border in the Chinese territory or the Tibetan territory between a Lieutenant General led delegation of Indian Army and a Lieutenant General led delegation of the Chinese Army actually has only one point of contention, and that is how the Chinese must go back from finger 4 and finger 5, 6 and 8, where they have come in larger numbers than before, but have got no permanent shelters or permanent structures put in place. All other hotspots, if I may call them, at Galwan, Hot Springs, or even threatening DBO, are only diversionary tactics by the Chinese. This is not something that India is not aware of, and therefore the negotiations will concentrate only on trying to get the Chinese to vacate that area between finger 8 and finger 4. The way the Chinese have occupied the Aksai Chin area is something which is masterful deception adopted by the Middle Kingdom, as China is known as the world over. Let me go back again to the old maps of 1963. If you look at this figure, this map which will come up now, the Indian police patrols used to go right up to what is called the easternmost part of Aksai Chin, east of the Aksai Chin highway, which you can see on the map. They used to go there just to show flag. But gradually from 1959, Indian policemen or Indian police parties were prevented by the Chinese and pushed back westwards. And now we know that the LAC or the perceived LAC between India and China is where it is right now. That way, the Chinese have claimed the entire Aksai Chin area, which rightfully belongs to India. Now, these are in various ways called salami slicing, creeping forward policy, but whatever it may be, in the old days it was possible because India did not have any presence or had negligible presence in those areas at Galwan and Hot Springs and Chushul, in DBO or what is now called Subsector North. But today the Indian Army has substantial presence in these areas, and Indian Army has the surveillance capability to detect any movement of the Chinese forces, as they did at Galwan on 5th and 6th of May. As they moved forward, India also built up its strength or moved some battalions west of the DS-DBO road, which is built and completed in 2019. And the Chinese realized that their game was up. They thought they are surprising Indians, but Indians actually surprised the Chinese by building up as quickly or even quicker than the Chinese could really build up forces in the Galwan Valley. That's where the standoff continues. There is no eyeball to eyeball contact between Indian and Chinese forces at either Galwan or below it in Hot Springs. But the main contentious point is the finger area, and that's where the negotiations are on currently. That's going to be a prolonged negotiations perhaps, but both sides have started de-escalating, indulging in negotiations at various levels, and of course the talks between the military delegations have taken place in Ladakh as we speak. What will be the end result? We'll have to wait and watch. But As far as India is concerned, Indian decision makers, military leadership, everyone is aware that when it comes to the Chinese, patience is the key. It's a long haul when it comes to border negotiations or any negotiations with the Chinese. Therefore, we'll have to continue to keep looking at the way the Chinese advance their interest, and of course be vigilant in whatever we do with the Chinese or against the Chinese. That's all I have to say on this episode of Simply Nitin. I will come back perhaps live in the next episode, but we will announce it before going live. But do keep watching Simply Nitin and like us on our social media platforms and keep sending feedback, suggestions, so that I can sometimes take up those suggestions and discuss various issues concerning India's military, foreign policy and strategic issues. Until the next time, it's goodbye.